We've got a guest this morning. We got our first guest we've got to get to.
Yeah, let's change topics here real quick. We talked a lot about Proposal 2 on the ballot.
Yeah.
That's the Voters Not Politicians proposal. And what we learned basically last Friday a week ago, was all of a sudden that Voters Not Politicians, which had billed itself as a nonpartisan organization, received $14 million in out-of-state money from dark money groups that
this
Democrats.
Group that has been so pompous about their citizens' effort, and we're different. We're voters. We're not politicians. Taking $14 million in dark money that they will not say who it came from.
No, and then we found out $10.6 million of it came from two out-of-state groups. One of them, the biggest funder, is called the 1630 Fund, which doesn't disclose donors, and basically just says its mission is to change social and environmental policies and promote civic engagement. Very vague, nebulous.
I guarantee you that's a Democratic-leaning group, a left-leaning group.
It is. It's
what was the other one?
I got to pull that up. All of them are not necessarily listed. I'm sorry. The Action Now initiative gave $5.1 million.
And who are they?
It's a Texas energy hedge fund billionaire, John Arnold, and his wife, and it raised money for redistricting ballot measures and taxes on pop drinks in Oregon. That's its claim to
leftist fund, and this is a group that claimed bipartisanship or nonpartisanship, claimed they were beyond the political influences. $14 million in dark money from two very well-funded groups, and they're not disclosing who the donors were or where this, who contributed to these groups. I mean, it's dark money. It's the sort of thing that has polluted our politics, and this group that pretends to be non-political, deep in it.
Yeah,
they're up to their butts in it, if you will. I would stay away from this one. We've recommended not supporting Prop 2 because of we don't believe it's a nonpartisan effort. We think it will be a highly partisan effort. We think it'll make it almost impossible to draw districts. Plus, this is group that they're forming, this commission they're forming, has almost unlimited power to. They can claim as much of the state budget as they want. They can ask for as much money as they want. There's no oversight. They can travel wherever they want. They can claim up to 25% of the Secretary of State's budget. Yeah. It is just one of the most deceitful proposals I've seen on the ballot in a long time. It's straight out of the Democratic Party, and it is not voters, not politicians. It's voters get screwed.
Yeah. Well, the Katie Fahey, who runs the Voters Not Politicians group, she was questioned when all of this money came out. She, then reporters, nonpartisan reporters said, "You said you're not a Democratic group. You've long pushed that narrative, and now we've got $14 million coming from outside progressive causes." And her response was essentially to point to the conservative opposition group called the Michigan Freedom Fund. And she said, well, the Michigan Freedom Fund is spending millions of dollars to keep the status quo of rigged politicians.
They don't pretend to be anything but what they are.
Exactly. And so we reached out to the Michigan Freedom Fund, and we've got the head of that organization, Tony Daunt, on the line. Tony, welcome to the Nolan Finley Show this morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
So are you some secret dark money group, Tony, or what's going on here?
No, the Michigan Freedom Fund's been around for 6 years now. I've been there for a little over 5. And, everybody affiliated with the Michigan Freedom Fund is a known entity within Michigan. And as I think I heard Nolan say, we are very upfront about our advocacy, the fact that we are a conservative organization, and that we believe firmly in the right of everybody, left or right, to engage in debate and in politics and in their First Amendment rights without fear of intimidation, without fear of retaliation, that type of thing, based on who your donors are. What should be pointed out is the rank hypocrisy and deceit of what Voters Not Politicians has claimed to be all along, something that we have pointed out from day one.
And that they're a progressive-leaning group, that they're not.
They're a Democratic-leaning group. They're
Yeah.
bankrolled by unions, bankrolled by these Democratic billionaires who have been pouring tens of millions of dollars into elections in this state. Out-of-state billionaires trying to influence Michigan's politics. They've pumped tons of money into the Alyssa Slotkin campaign out in the 8th District. They poured money into the 11th District race on behalf of the Democrat. These people are spreading their money around, these California, Texas billionaires spreading their money around to influence Michigan politics.
Yeah. Well, and
you're a Michigan group, aren't you, Tony?
Oh, absolutely. We are fully staffed by people who are from here in Michigan, who have been involved in
Most
Michigan.
of your funds raised in Michigan?
Oh, absolutely. We are very proud of the donors that we have across the state, large, medium, small, what have you, and the people that we work with. And it was the grassroots in Michigan here that have been coming to us and, begging somebody to please, lead an effort against this ballot initiative. And we took up that mantle. And, we've been pointing out from day one that this group is not what they say they are. We had looked into their funders and their founders, made sure that we had our facts correct, and not a single dime had been contributed to Republican officials or right-leaning causes by the people who founded this. We tried to get that message out repeatedly. They denied it repeatedly. And then lo and behold, a month or so ago, Eric Holder drops $250K into this thing.
Sure. Before he did that, these people were all over my back for writing that they were indeed a Democratic front group, and this wasn't a citizens initiative. I heard from 1,000 of them saying, "Oh, we went out and collected petitions. This is all citizen volunteers, blah, blah, blah." And they were staffed by the unions, by the MEA, by the Sierra Club, and funded by the Democratic groups. This is the most hypocritical, deceitful movement group we've seen in Michigan in a long time. And voters seem to be buying it.
That's the fascinating thing. Can you talk a little bit about that, Tony? Because I think most voters don't get as deep into the weeds as we do, and they look at things at a top level. And voters, not politicians, sounds good. And I've heard a lot of conservatives or Republicans who say, I'm going to support. Oh, I'd support that, because they don't know the details of what the proposal are. Because in order to find it, you got to go online and read the whole thing. The 350 words they put on the ballot are innocuous. They're harmless. But what's the message to conserve? I mean, we now know the message to Democrats. The message to Democrats, we knew it all along, but the message to Democrats is we're going to redistrict out some Republicans here if you pass this. What's the message to Republicans or conservatives that you have about the concerns with it? Is it just we have to keep Republicans in office and they're trying to take it away, or is it that this is a bad ballot measure, in and of itself?
Well, that's a great question, and we have been, as a conservative myself, I'm skeptical of government and politicians, and it's something that if I wasn't paying much attention, I think, oh, this sounds pretty good. Let's take it out of the hands of those yin-yangs in Lansing. But when you dig into it, it's the policy itself. It has nothing to do with who's in control of drawing the lines. It's the fact that this can be they can pay themselves whatever they want. They can demand a budget of whatever size they want. It is a blank check.
And no court oversight.
Own proposal.
No court challenges. No court oversight. No oversight by anyone.
They are accountable to literally nobody but themselves. The 13 people on this board would be accountable to themselves and themselves only. And the only thing a court could do related to the lines would be to say, well, this one's bad, draw another one. Yes. And it's just a ridiculous way of.
So they could hijack the whole process and stick us with a extremely damaging redistricting map and nothing to do about it because it's locked into our Constitution. And we've been telling people from the beginning, don't lock untested ideas, untested initiatives into the Constitution where they're almost impossible to fix. Think term limits and the damage it's done. Don't lock things into the Constitution. And that's exactly what we're being asked to do on 3 proposals this year. Voters should vote no on all of them. They're too complex. Their consequences are too unknown. Vote no across the board.
So what do you make of the disparity in funding here? Because Voters Not Politicians has raised a lot of big money. $5.5 million from the 1630 fund, $5 million from Action Now. Eric Holder gave $250,000. SEIU gave $500,000. The NEA, the National Education Association, $120,000. I mean, they've raised big dollars from big outside organizations. So they've raised over $16 million basically now. Compare that to the amount of money that's been spent on the conservative side of the aisle. How much do you think your organization and others have spent to try and educate people on why they shouldn't vote for this?
Well, I know that, the Michigan Freedom Fund, that we have provided around $3 million to the ballot question committee that is fighting this. And there are some other groups that have provided funding to the ballot question committee as well. The Michigan Chamber is in for a chunk, business leaders for Michigan. And, I think it just shows that the folks out of state, the billionaires, the groups out of state that are throwing all this money at it, they must think it's going to benefit the left in some fashion, or they wouldn't be spending, $5 million at a time. And we at the Freedom Fund, saw that this group had basically unfettered and unchallenged access to the airwaves, and decided that the resources that we have, we would put some towards defeating this, because it is such a bad idea, because it is untested. We shouldn't experiment with our Constitution like this, and it really should make anybody who was on the fence about this really skeptical about the motives of so-called voters, not politicians. That for 18 months they talk about their nonpartisan nature. They talk about being of the citizens of Michigan, and then at the very last minute, when few people are paying attention to it, they drop $10.5 million from out of state.
Yeah, I mean, they had this holier-than-thou attitude throughout the whole campaign, and now at the end we see who they are.
That's exactly right, and I think that should give people pause. And as with anything, when we got 3,200 words trying to be added to the Constitution, the safe thing is to vote no. And let's have a conversation about doing something different about redistricting.
And would you be surprised, Tony, to find out that some of that $10 million is going to turn out Democratic voters in this election?
I am as shocked as if the sun rose in the east today.
Let's hear from Michael on line 1.
Nolan, this is Mike.
Hey.
Hey, my comment is, I think Proposal 1 should go through, yes. Number 2, the gerrymandering issue. Why should we leave in place a Republican implemented legislative districts across the state of Michigan that is gerrymandered? Look at the presidential election in 2016. The congressional races were all won by, look at the vote collectively, there were more Democrats voting for Congress, for congressional candidate, Democratic Party than the Republican. However, the Republican Party still controlled the balance of power.
And that's disingenuous, Michael, because you also have heavy concentration of Democratic voters in certain geographic areas. They're not spread across the state in the same manner as Republican voters. It'd be impossible to draw these districts. You got the 14th district, for example, in Detroit, where 90% of the voters are Democratic. Of course, you're going to have an uneven outcome. That's not a good argument, Michael. It's not even. It's not even. It's a product of the fact where people live. You have more Democratic voters concentrated in a very small geographic area in southeastern Michigan. Well, the people who chose to live where they choose to live. It has nothing to do with the way the districts are drawn. You're not going to take a mid-Michigan Republican district and draw it down to Detroit just so you could get more Democratic voters in that district. Of course, there's an unequal distribution. It's the way our state is populated. Who else we got? Tom, thanks for coming on the show.
Tim's on.
The cursor was over the O.
Yeah, good morning. Who writes the proposals? Like when they put the proposals together, like I have my S&P ballot, who does all the wording? Like
They do.
The people who are paying for the proposal do, and that's again one of the problems. We got to get to a break. We're way over time.
We do. The people writing it, so they get to pitch it however they want.
Thank our guests, and let's get to a
Yes,
break.
yeah. Tony Daunt, apologies. Tony Daunt from the Michigan Freedom Fund. Thank you for joining us this morning, man.
Happy to be here. Thanks so much.